Christopher, one of my passions is about communication and language. And in the role between parent and child, or between actually any human being and another, there is this thing called communication, of which the concept of language is so deeply immersed in that. So in the role of parenting, especially in how we communicate between parent and child, in this thing called language as well, in the way in which we see the world, our reality of the world, the perception that we have of the world. Share a bit more about how you see that between a parent and a child.
I think what we have to start off with is that human beings are, for me, the master magicians. We have an extraordinary ability to take the raw substance of the universe in which we find ourselves, in particular planet Earth, and by the application of our imagination, transform it into completely different things. What this leads on for me as well is the pure magic of language. Because it is only through language that we can, with our minds, take that which we conceive of out of the realm of thought, whatever that might be, and that in itself could be a whole discussion, out of the realm of thought, and through language make it real. In a very real sense, make it real. It's absolutely extraordinary that I can take an idea, translate it into something physical, a sound, which then I push towards you. I have to be within range. You take it, it hits something physical in your body, the eardrum, and then you interpret it. And then we have a level of communication. Now, this is extraordinary. And sadly, these days, I don't think that there's nearly enough emphasis put on teaching our children just what a magical process this is. It is perhaps to be regretted, and it's a silly thing to say, because it tends to let us off the hook, that our children start to speak with very little input, direct input from ourselves. They appear to do this, that much overused word, instinctively. Whereas if they didn't do that instinctively, then once again we would have to put the effort in teaching them how to do this process. So in that, perhaps we would then also be forced to look at how we talk, how we do it, so that we could teach them to communicate more effectively than they do. As it happens, because once again they rely upon these giants that are in their immediate environment, an enormous number of our children grow up without really appreciating the wonder of language, without understanding or any grasp of the magnificent tool that they have got for the interpretation of the physical universe. So language has become a kind of, one hesitates to say, obsolete tool.
So perhaps there's the distinction that I want to create between communication and language. Communication is a kind of tool that we have, like you've so detailedly explained and described, of how I articulate a thought or a feeling such that you hopefully can understand what I'm thinking or feeling. And then we have language.
Then we can have a relationship.
Sure, that will come as a result of us being able to share, right? And then we have language, which is also how we make meaning of the reality around us. Language gives form to something which on its own exists outside of language, right? Because that over there is a couch only because I say it is a couch, because there's certain definitions that describe it as a couch, but that itself is also leather. That itself is also made of thread and wooden structure. But wood is also something that I've given it. It itself is nothing except some cells together. But cells together is also a whole different explanation. So share then the power of language in the role of being human, and how that's also a very misunderstood realm in the upbringing of a child.
Not only misunderstood, I think it's largely ignored. As I say, go back to it, I think one of the unfortunate things I get the difficulty with this. I get the difficulty is that children grow up learning to talk themselves without too much direct input from the parent. It kind of happens. We fail in our duty, and I mean the word duty, to our children if we do not make a conscious effort to both improve our own language and to insist that our children make a conscious effort to use language correctly, whatever the language might be, whichever language it is. Language is not a higgledy-piggledy arrangement of vowels and sounds. Language, if it's going to be effective, needs to be structured, needs to be taught, and it has rules. Otherwise, how can you play the game? I cannot play the game of communicating with you unless you and I are operating within the same parameters, the same rules. We might as well try and play chess without there being rules. It just becomes a mess.
And what I'm thinking about and what I'm clear about is when you were sharing earlier about you have a thought, you put it into a physical form, it comes across to my brain through the airwaves, I'm interpreting it. Words and letters are pretty much the same, right? A group of letters create a word. Words together make a sentence. Sentences together make a different impact. And if you carefully, like you mentioned, like the alchemists, combine certain words together in a certain way, the result of that on the listener can transform how I see the world and how I see myself.
Totally.
Now, there's something quite special in that. I mean, you mentioned earlier, it's like a spell, right? The power of language to impact another person is, it's taking these little vibrations, but the impact of that and the meaning made is phenomenal, and that's language. Now, the parents who speak to their children are creating that, even if they're doing it unconsciously, even if they have no idea of the power of the recipe of the order of their words and the words they choose. That is making a cake of some sort, right? So imagine what it would be like, maybe you can talk into that, which is what would it actually be like for a parent who knows how to make these cakes called language, these magical formulas or magical recipes that really use language to impact our children in the most amazing, magnificent ways.
Yeah, and again, one must accept that you're going to mess it up, that you're not going to get it right all the time. Accept. You're going to do that. So one can strive to be the very best that we can, and that's as good as we're going to get. The striving to be the very best that we can. This whole idea that language is a magical tool for the creation of an awareness of my state of being, and that for me is the basis of relationship. If you're not going to teach your children how to do that so that they can first become aware of your state of being, then how on earth in later years are they going to be able to, through the magic of language, express how they're feeling? And this is one of the things that we have great difficulty with these days, is that children and that adults have great difficulty in expressing how they're feeling, because they've never been taught the magic of being able to translate that energy that is pumping around in them into a symbol that they can express as language. Then where does communication come in? It is frankly non-existent. Now, this goes back to basics. I mean, the whole business, these are topics that we could cover, the whole business of feeling sad, feeling glad, feeling angry, feeling fearful, and so on and so forth. Unless we inculcate an adequate vocabulary in our children out of ourselves, of course, we need to have the vocabulary at our own fingertips before we can inculcate it in others. We're not going to get anywhere. As you so eloquently put it, we're not going to be making a very nice cake, and neither will we be making a range of cakes. And then we come up with and one comes up against it all the time. How you feel? I'm fine. Now, what on earth am I if I'm in some kind of relationship with you, meant to do with that.